Welcome, everybody, to Cali Cocktail Social Hour. We'd like to thank Alise and Toks James. She's a life coach, writer, and speaker. He's a business owner, model, and creator. We'll be having them all the way from Australia, so stay tuned. Welcome. Give them a good California welcome from the good part of the United States, the best part of the United States, California. In Oregon, Washington, New York. Hello, Chris, Brian, Lydia, Lynn, Leela. Hey, Brian, love you too. Miss you too, buddy. St. Helena's a beautiful place. Come on, sit back, relax. It's almost time. Así de todos de México, de Sacramento, de Zacatecas. Hola a todos ahí, con mucho amor todos. A big virtual hug for everybody here at the Cali Cocktail Social Hour. They're coming up right now. I always cut that too quick. Next time I'll be there. I'm more better on that one. So welcome to the Cali Cocktail Social Hour. We have some wonderful people here today to talk to you about some special things in life in general. I have Melissa Pennel, the funky chicken, is going to join me in a second. And hola, Lila, ¿cómo estás? And Lila, my friend Lisa got 2 masks today in Portland, Oregon. Today from you. Well, not from, but her friends bought it from you because they saw you on the show. And so they sent them up today to Portland to represent La Raza, the culture of Mexico in Portland when they're at the protest rallies. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming. And right now I'm going to bring up Melissa because I know she's not ready. I can tell. Sometimes I'll catch her eating food, drinking her coffee. To me, now I'm not going to get her back. Anyways, here we go with Melissa now.
Hey guys!
Hola.
Oh my God, I'm like totally ready to be on camera. Yeah, often I'm typing, so I'm all when you pull me up. But hi everybody, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that you're joining us. Say hello, and also, am I mistaken or did you call me the frumpy chicken? Because I'm pretty sure you said Melissa the frumpy chicken, and I am a lot of things.
It's my Spanish and English.
Oh, don't you blame your Spanish and English.
It's my new Mexican talk. So yeah.
That's like a really great way to slide in like little insults is be like, oh, it's just my Mexican English. You're asshole.
Yes,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Throw in some. I like, first of all, before we start, I want to give out to my sponsor who gave me the beautiful mezcal. Tres Tiempos.
Ooh.
Mezcal. Gracias all the way from Oaxaca, Mexico. Gracias. And my heart goes out to Mexico right now because of the coronavirus and what they're going through right now, where they're at the epicenter of everything. So my heart, corazón para Mexico y para Oaxaca. And gracias para el mezcal, para todo bien. Mezcal. Uh-oh. See, I said it backwards. Anyways, we'll go back to that. Gracias, Raúl. There you go.
Mexico. Yeah, it is crazy how it's sort of like, not sort of, but traveling at different speeds, like getting big in different places. Because when you think about where the virus is now, or even just last week or the week before that, think about how we felt in like December when we saw on the news, like there's this thing happening in China and it's a big deal. And it did seem like a big deal, but it didn't necessarily affect us yet. And that sounds very, kind of like separatist, but it's like there's so much going on in the world all the time. It wasn't yet apparent that this was such a big deal for us. So I guess I imagine, I don't know if every country was as stupid as us either. So not that we're stupid, but we didn't have exactly like the best protocols in place.
Leela says, "Hey girl," and I think that's for you.
I don't know. Maybe it's her Spanish English thing. She might be calling you girl.
Right.
Leela, I'm totally gonna order some masks, you guys. She just sent me all of the ones that she has right now. So I'm assuming that you want to sell more of these.
And also, Leela didn't understand that I was actually trying to outbid Melissa on that mask that she wanted. I wanted that mask that she got. That's,
I know. So she was so sweet. She was like, "Oh, they want to be twins," and I was like, "No, he's trying to take the one I want to buy."
So this would do. So I want to say this for para todo mal mezcal y para todo bien también, which is what I was going to say, but I got fixed.
Can you translate? What does that say?
It's more romantic in Spanish. But it says for everything bad that happens in life, mezcal, but for everything good also. Right? It's a drink. So Tres Tiempos, it's a long. He's gonna have him on a show to explain his mezcal too. So because it has a different meanings the 3 times. Tres Tiempos, I think it's life, you're born, when you celebrate, and when you die. So I don't know if you remember, like when you see people getting mezcal or the tequila and then pouring it down on the graves. That was from Mexico.
Oh, that originated.
I don't know, but that's where I see it. In the cemeteries all the time when Day for Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
So, anyways, let's talk about our guests tonight.
Yeah. We are
just met
so
them.
Excited.
Great people. Yeah.
They are fabulous. They're from Australia. They're from, I was going to say like halfway around the world, but I haven't looked at a globe since I was like 10. So I don't know. It's like far away, you guys. They're from Australia. They are a husband and wife duo. I feel like I'm introducing them like they're like on a sitcom, just like. But anyway, I actually kind of want to let them introduce themselves because I can tell you a lot about them. But they're both just very, like, the word that comes to mind, just like spitfire is like the word coming to mind, but just very big, very smart, very powerful, and very different, and also married to each other. And so we're going to talk about creativity. We're going to talk about race. We're going to talk about parenting. We're going to talk about kind of wherever the conversation goes. But whoever is joining us tonight, this is a really special one because as a white person, we're about to dive into some serious content. And with that, we never handle, like vulnerability lightly, but this is especially something that I'm just really grateful to be able to bring to the people who watch our show every week. And we would love to have you guys interact. Because we have a great audience too. That's the other thing is that I think I was thinking about, whenever you have a discussion about something that everything in life is controversial, but that is very controversial at the moment. I'm just really grateful to have them. And this is why I should have just let them introduce themselves, because I'm going to spend like 10 minutes. My cat just climbed the chair behind me. I don't know if you can see her. So she's in the frame now. She wants some attention. There's something up there. Anyway, so Alise and Toks James. So Let's welcome them
Hello,
to
Rob.
the studio. Hi,
So
Rob.
everyone, let's give them a good California welcome.
Yeah.
And from our international guest. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How's it going, everyone?
Hey. I also too, we always tell everyone like, hey, we dress kind of weird. So, you know, like if you want to wear something weird, you can. So at least I love that you're wearing your daughter's tiara. It just makes me happy.
Wearing my daughter's tiara, and the way that we angled the camera, there's like a Barbie dream house in the back. So it's very should walk in. I've got her beautiful Barbie doll that she has.
Oh my goodness, I love it.
I remember there's some beautiful black girlfriends of mine, and they said that if they'd had one of these when they were growing up, they would have changed their lives. So just dive right in there and just say how amazing it is just to see people. And Toks is a model. He does big guy modeling.
I know, hard to believe. But...
And it's really important. There's a subject that comes up a lot about like seeing yourself and particularly we live in Australia. I'm Australian, but Toks is Nigerian parents born in England. And we just are here really to chat. I don't know if we describe ourselves as Spitfires. I don't.
That's perfect.
I'll run with that. I'll take that.
It's gonna spit. Yeah.
We're gonna see when we get there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm the controversial one.
Yeah, you are.
Melissa, I'm a Latin Spitfire.
I'm the frumpy one.
Frumpy
and
king.
I think I don't know why the word Spitfire is coming to mind, but I think it's just the word for me that is like brave and just doing things that not everyone is doing. And in this current climate, I've seen both of you in different spaces just having conversations that I'll just say right now I'm scared to have. And obviously I'm, me, but part of why I'm just so grateful to have both of you here is that for one, you're in sort of a unique, very different from most of us situation, right? Like Toks, I actually missed where you were from. I knew you weren't from Australia, but so now that I know that, just knowing of how much traveling you've done through the world in a Black body, at least what it's been like for you, even just in a little bit you shared about raising a biracial daughter and making sure she has things like that Barbie to see herself in, or that doll. So yeah, if anything, you guys, I would love to maybe, I know I sort of already opened the like race, let's talk about this but can I hear just a little bit from each of you about if we were at a cocktail party? That's how I used to always start my podcast. If we were at a cocktail party and I said, oh, hey, Alise, who are you? Tell me about yourself. What would you say?
Normally at a cocktail party, I'd be like the one that'd be like going, oh my God. Oh, first of all, just before we do the cocktail party, I'd say if I met you at a cocktail party, I was like, did you know that my daughter was born in Argentina? Because I'm feeling the connection and so she was born in Argentina, and Toks and I used to live in Mendoza in Argentina. Our Spanish is appalling, so please don't. I
got questions now. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Like no. It's kind of muy mal. It's like muy mal. It's like that. But so we've kind of been all over the place. So if I met you at a cocktail party, I'd probably be so grateful, and I'd probably feel like, oh my God, I'm not very good at small talk. I'd be the one that'd be like, I just want to meet the people who I can have deep conversations with. Even when I do Facebook Lives, I don't know how to handle the first 2 minutes when you're supposed to just go, hi, I'm just cruising around waiting for people. I don't even know how to do that. So I'm kind of like I jump in and go for the deep. I'm the deep. Yeah, but for me, that just feels normal. So, I mean, how I met Toks, we had a 2-hour conversation, and I kind of fell in love with him before I actually even really saw what he looked like. I was very, very pleasantly surprised when I met him the next time. I was like, oh my God, look at this gorgeous man. But before, I was like, the conversation itself was the thing that connected us. So yeah.
Wait. I'm interested. So were you like in a very dark room? Were you over the phone? How did you not see him?
Yeah, I know. I tend to disappear in dark rooms.
No. I'm picturing one of those, like, they're actually bars where you can't see anything. You just like kind of are led around and you literally meet people without seeing them, which I think sounds very scary and also kind of cool. But I'm guessing that's not the case of what happened.
I can imagine those bars are probably full of very strange people.
Yes.
I think you might want to avoid those.
Yeah, Toks had a chauffeur company, and he picked me up from the airport. And so when he picked me up from the airport, we drove like 2 hours, and I just saw his eyes through like literally, it was like I was into the conversation. I was actually, I was even married at the time that I met him. So it was kind of like, I wasn't even really going there. I was like, just talking to this amazing man, and we were talking about these things. I do remember that he made me feel incredibly at ease, like really quickly. And then we were having this big chat. We got stuck in traffic, but I really only remember his eyes.
Okay. So basically, she's saying I talked her out of her marriage. That's what she
That's pretty good. Yes.
You and your eyes, yeah.
Which is not exactly what happened, but it's a very long story. But yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That sounds like a movie. And just hearing it from her perspective, what was it like from your perspective? There in the front seat, you're driving this beautiful Spitfire woman, and what's going through your mind?
No, honestly speaking, I was having a great conversation. Of course, because I knew she was married, because I'd spoken to her husband earlier on in the day, I didn't really think it was, I didn't think of it like that at all. We were just having a great conversation. It was like a great conversation, when I dropped her off, I took her bags up to her apartment, and her husband was there, and, and she hugged me, goodbye. And that was kind of how, I thought that was the end of it. I didn't think that, we'll see each other again, but as life would have it, that's not what happened. We kind of, without going into too much detail, we kind of reconnected, and and here we are today.
And now you have Barbie's dream house.
Right.
A little baby, Willow, maybe we'll get her to come out later. At the moment, she's like in her bedroom with her puppy dog.
Oh my gosh, that was so cute. They both came out in the last video that I saw, but it really is always interesting to hear how people met. And then even just, I'm sure we could do a whole show on your journey for people who have traveled so much and gone through the world, with each other. But I do think it's always kind of neat to look at where you have arrived, because like Leela just said, you never know what the future brings. And those two people in that car that day probably never would have imagined this tiara and this hat and this Barbie dream house and Willow and all of the life that you've created together.
Because the funny thing was, when I met Alise, I literally had, I've always had serious relationships, and I've always had long relationships. And the last relationship I had before I met Alise, I was literally like, you know what? I'm obviously crap at this relationship game. I'm just going to quit. So I was just literally like, I'm just going to throw myself into work, build up my company. And I wasn't looking to be in another relationship, because I just thought it just drained me. It was too much energy. And, you're literally not thinking about it at all. And so even from the point where we had a conversation, I still wasn't thinking about it. And like, it was just so strange how we just ended up where we were, and it was in a very short time period as well. It wasn't like a long time. It was like, this is over a period of like a couple of months, where we just got very serious very quickly, and we both took serious risks. I was like, oh, I'm leaving my company, she's leaving her husband. It's like, I'm leaving the country that I know to go to a country where I've never been to before, and literally it was, I didn't speak the language. It was like, it was just all like, everything was on the table, like super fast kind of thing, But at the time, I think it was 40. Was it 40? I can't remember.
I don't know.
We were about 43, yeah.
42 when we met.
42 and 43. So, I mean, that kind of also kind of lit a little bit of fire under our ass, because you're kind of like, well, if things don't work out, you can always just go back to starting, whatever you were doing again, but if they did, it's going to be a great thing. We didn't have the time to kind of like mess around like you are when you're a teenager or in your 20s, where you can drag things out for years, so. And
also I think that, we just, at that age too, we don't have it, like, we don't have any bullshit, like, between one another. There was no sort of pretense. And also just to say, I was separated and living in Argentina. So I'd come back over to see my ex, and Toks just picked me up, and he was supposed to pick me up with him, and he decided to sleep in. Big mistake.
Yeah.
Don't get someone to pick up your wife at the airport and stay in bed, okay?
Yeah. So all the men
Note
out there,
to self.
no two men out there. If your wife is coming back from a trip, do not sleep in. She might go off with someone else.
Not everyone.
So that is the
He's like, oh shit.
Oh, I don't sleep. That's a good part. So I have a question for you, and we talked a little bit about this earlier. And you're in a safe zone right now, a Trump safe zone. But what does Australia think of our president right now?
Well, I think it's the same as it is in America. There are two camps. Like, Australians are, for want of a lack of a better expression, I would say Australians are quite ignorant in terms of worldly affairs. So
yes,
and that's
we got a lot of those here.
Yeah, it's not an insult. It's just an observation.
No, yeah.
Right? I just feel like they're
isolated.
All their information comes through major media outlets, and the major media outlets here obviously are like run by Rupert Murdoch, so they're very biased. They only report a certain side, perspective of the news. So a lot of people think, like, I had someone who, by all intents and purposes, is extremely educated, runs their own business, comes from a kind of like an ethnic background, not of color, but like, from Eastern Europe and stuff like that, and the Eastern European Jews. So they've gone through all that kind of stuff. But she was literally talking to me about like the unemployment figures, that she was saying to me that, but Trump has, he has increased employment for people of color. And I was like, no, he hasn't. He just has the knock-on effect from the Obama era. So that's what the media will tell you, but that's not how things work. Things take a few years. He's claiming credit for something he hasn't done. But this is somebody who's smart and traveled and, runs their own business, goes to America, goes to the UK, and they still have this kind of very slanted perspective of how things work. So there are two camps here. A lot of people, mostly foreign people, think that Trump is obviously most people with a brain between their two ears thinks he's an asshole. But when we have the others that obviously never left their front yard, and they think he's like some kind of messiah. It's like, oh yeah, he's just saying it how he is. But I'm like, when has saying it how it is been something you can laud someone up for? It's like, I can go to, can you imagine if you went to Starbucks in the morning and you ordered your coffee and you were in a bad mood because you hadn't had your coffee, and the person behind the counter turned around and said, you know what, I don't like your attitude, you're an asshole, you need to leave. You'd be like, I'm gonna get you fired. But and the Starbucks person would be like, but I'm just saying it how it is, what's your problem?
Yeah, well, I think it's true. That's a lot of like what we're going through now, right? Like, say tomorrow there's we have the coronavirus going on, we're peaking, and he's having a rally tomorrow, right? Rally 20,000 people. Yeah, but he doesn't believe it. But you have to sign but you have to sign a waiver to say that you won't sue him if you get coronavirus, and people are signing the waiver to get into the rally. So that is a different level.
Like, it's actually working. And then
we'll see.
Yeah, we can only hope that it's their gift that they can spread between each other.
I know.
Look,
I probably will at that point.
Yeah, what's that thing? I think when they talk about eliminating I think it's when the dumbest amongst you kind of eliminate themselves from, being part of the human race, and this is basically what might happen. You might have all these people going to the and literally infecting one another. Look at you. Yeah.
I'm gonna post Lila's post, but I don't think she's meant what we're talking behind about Trump. So
yeah, I don't think she's a Trump supporter. So fuck that. It's somewhere in there. You know what I think is interesting? Ruben, I can speak for myself, but I know that I don't know a lot about what's happening in Australia. Just for example, like, I remember when there were the fires, that was a very big deal everywhere because it was such a big story. But I say that because it seems like either everyone just knows about our country because our president's so stupid, but I think it was even before that, or just like that we're almost like, is it the Hollywood? Is like, what is, or is it our education? Because I know that we are not, like, I don't really know geography, to be completely honest. And I had a pretty good education. There's a lot that's missed here. So I guess I'm saying two things. I think that, I guess I'm wondering, like, in your country, in Australia, why do you know what's happening here? Is it because it's so outrageous, or are you kind of expected to know?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, I think this is not just unique to Australia. I think most countries know what's going on in America. One, because like Americans are like vegans, like, you know, so Americans like, so literally they'll tell you everything about themselves. So one of the things is, like, I always get into arguments with people because, you know, Americans always like, oh, you know, when I'm on forums or in, you know, chats, people like, Americans like, oh, you know what? You're not even American. You know, why are you even talking about America? And I'm like, because you guys keep sort of like telling us about yourselves.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
So, like, we know more about you than you know about yourselves, because we hear about you all the time. It's like, you know, you always trying to enforce, the Americans are always trying to enforce their rule on the rest of the world. You know, it's like they're always bullying some country, or they're always telling people that they're going to invade. So by default, we have to know about America, because literally, you know, it's funny because Americans always say you should worry about Russia. You know, Russia could launch a nuke. You should worry about China. They could launch a nuke. And like most of the world are like, we're worried about you guys.
Yeah, well, you're not stable.
It's true.
We've seen your president. We've seen your movies. We know how things go.
Totally.
Well,
I worry about us too.
You know,
I remember,
and I'm sure that
I think that the world isn't really, my personal take is, I don't think the world is divided so much along racial lines as there's assholes and non-assholes, right? Like, I think that, you know, like whatever color you are, there'll be people who are really ignorant and don't want to know any information about anything. And then there are people of any color and persuasion that actually really, really want to know. Like, I'm a white Australian. I was born here. I left because it's a really small, little claustrophobic, like there's only 20 something million people in the whole place, right? And I took a one-way ticket over to England, and I was really shocked about how little I knew about Aboriginal people when I got, someone asked me, a Black American asked me when I was working in Benetton, of all places, you know, the United Colours of Benetton, and he was asking me about Australians. And I was just like, you know what? I don't know. Most of the time we're brought up thinking that Aboriginal people or our Indigenous population, like, we kind of, like, everyone was criticizing South Africa at the time. There was apartheid when I was growing up as a teenager. And Australians seem like we're so nice, but actually we're really terrible. Like, the history that we have with our Indigenous people is shocking.
It's shocking. It is really
shocking.
bad.
And I think I know about it. And like, I was just reading this thing the other day about how many, like, up to 10,000 Aboriginal people were killed just so that they could have their skeletons sent over to museums all over Europe. They were, like, literally herded off cliffs. You could buy a license to kill an Aboriginal. The last person who had one of those died within a 20-year period. So, and, you know, we spoke about, like, hundreds of thousands of children being taken. Literally, they'd show up to Aboriginal townships with trucks that were designed like a pet of
like an ice cream van.
No, it was like cages with sweets inside.
But from the ice cream van,
yeah.
it looked like kind of like an ice cream van from the outside, something that, you know, that kids would be attracted to, and then they'll fill the back full of sweets and stuff, and then the kids would jump in, you know, thinking, oh, you know, it's Christmas time, and literally they'll just shut the door on them and then drive off and take them thousands of miles away from their parents. So, and then that would be the last that the parents would ever see their children again.
Yeah, so they never saw their children. This is like in the 50s, and it's only really, I think,
the 1950s.
Yeah, but there's only recently actually been an apology. So it's kind of like,
and it's not really even an apology. It's like, you know, it's almost like, you know what, I walked into your front room and, you know, I took a shotgun and blew your kneecaps off, and then I turned around and said, oh, I'm really sorry, here's a Band-Aid. You're like, what? My leg's hanging off. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do with the Band-Aid? You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of like that. It's like, so these apologies, they look great from a PR point of view, But at the same time, how can you apologize to people when you, at the same time, you're still sort of like taking their land away from them? As soon as you find anything, you know, like, you know, worth money, you come up with some excuse to move them off their land, or, you know, so you've like literally where we live now is beautiful, it's stunning, and these people used to inhabit these areas, and literally they've pushed them into the middle of Australia, which is just all desert, you know. But you say you're sorry, but you haven't integrated into society. There's no there's no visual representation of them, you know. It's like, so how am I supposed to believe you, basically? You know, it doesn't seem like you are sorry. So
it literally took 40, 50 years to even realize that people were doing anything wrong. And I think that that's kind of where we're at. Like, people like can apologize when they thought they'd done the wrong thing. These people thought they were doing a brilliant thing. They thought, you know, let's go in and make sure, because the genetic makeup of Aboriginals is, if you in a mixed race situation, whereas African genes are quite dominant. If you saw our daughter, she looks very African. Aboriginals can actually even look white.
Right, completely.
So they thought, oh, okay, well, let's just get everyone together and literally breed out Aboriginals. So it's kind of like, this is what's really shocking, is that nobody thought that was a bad idea. And that's how little people are respected. So I think I see there's a lot of work just even to get enough respect in this massive dehumanization, which happens.
I mean,
really, sorry.
No, I mean, like, even we're talking about 50 years ago, right? But even up to last year, there was a court case because 2 Indigenous Australians, I mean, okay, they're not the most upstanding characters in society, but they committed crimes, and the Australian government, because they had committed crimes, the Australian government said they were going to deport them. I'm like, but they're Indigenous Australians. Deport them to where? I know, it's like, that's like you guys, that's like a Native American Indian committing the crime, and then you turn around and say, well, you're really bad, we're going to deport you. And like, you'd be like, deport me where? This is where I'm from. You know,
I'll deport you.
Yeah, exactly. So they had to go to court. I mean, this is how Australia is. They had to literally waste money going to court to fight their right not to be deported.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
go ahead. Oh, no, I'm saying, like, you know, there's a lot of parallels to America, and, you know, it's always the indigenous, right?
Yeah.
Mexico, same thing. You know, Mexico, same thing. You know, I told Melissa, you know, I got my DNA, and I always felt, you know, I'm 54% indigenous, right? Native Asian, Native American from Mexico. So, but I've always, you know, I go to Oaxaca, I go to these places where, you know, they still speak the language, they still speak Zopotec, they still speak many languages in Oaxaca. But, you know, if you go further, you know, you know, a lot of them got their land taken away, you know. They had a little bit more respect in Mexico than they do in America. America's the same way, what you're saying, you know. So this is kind of the reckoning that we're, you know, that we're having right now, is because now they're taking off some Christopher Columbus. They're pulling off the statues. John Sutter, who founded Sacramento, but also murdered a lot of American Indians, right? In doing this. So, you know, and it's funny because we didn't learn, like we talk about history, we didn't learn this history. Everybody's freaking out because they don't know why Christopher Columbus would be, you know, would instill trauma in an American Indian, because when they came, they took everything out, you know, whether it's like, you know, they took out the whole, you know, obviously genocide, right? The whole nation of all these tribes. And, you know, there's, you know, they're very small now. They're not that many people. So, yeah. And, you know, and it seems like, you know, and you've been to Argentina, same thing in Latin America, you know, the indigenous are always the ones that get marginalized, and, you know, they're the ones living in the, you know, in the far left, you know, I mean, like, you know, just way out there in the mountains, right? They're, you know, they are always, it seems like it doesn't matter where you go, the indigenous people that are there are always subject to the conquerors, you know? That's because
the indigenous people had a way of life, right? And they were basically in tune with the land. So they just wanted to live a certain way. So when you have like a civilization land on you, that literally is not synonymous with its environment. I mean, literally the West, one of the things that people always tell me when we get into these arguments about, you know, the effects that, you know, slavery and colonialism has had on Africa, because that's where my parents are from. They're like, oh, but we brought you this and we brought you that. And I'm like, you say that like it's a good thing. Like, I mean, how is capitalism a good thing? How is building buildings, digging up your environment, poisoning your air, poisoning your water? How is that a good thing? Yeah, I mean, okay, don't get me wrong. I was born into this society, so I appreciate a plasma TV and an iPhone and, you know, a motorbike and a car and stuff like that. But that's because I was born into this environment. But let's be real, how is any of that helping our planet? You know, we always keep, you know, it's funny, Melissa, you touched on how do we know about America and stuff like that, and you mentioned Hollywood. And one of the things I always say to a lot of people, as much as I enjoy watching, you know, Hollywood films, it's a massive propaganda machine. Because if you ever go back, dial it back to cowboys and Indians, you think about the Westerns used to watch. The cowboys were always the good guys, and the Indians were always savages, committing, you know, acts of atrocities, you know, raping women, scalping people. That's basically savages. And basically, you know, so it wasn't. They were like, hold on a second, you invaded us. You guys have got guns. We need to defend ourselves. We're doing it any way, you know, any way we can. And you know, the fact that they tried to enslave them, you know, when they arrived, that gets missed, that gets ignored. That, you know, that never features in any movies.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that they tried to turn them into slaves, the fact that they couldn't do that because they were on the home ground and they rebelled, and they basically, I would arguably say that Native Americans created guerrilla warfare because they just struck how they could when they could, kind of thing. And then you go and you fast forward, and if you're watching American blockbuster movies, these are nuances that Black people are kind of privy to. But if you watch blockbuster movies, you'll notice that a lot of times that the good guy is American, you know, good American accent. The bad guy is always foreign. He's always either from Russia or from Europe. You know, he's never an American, so kind of thing. So you get that propaganda machine going, and it's the same thing about the planet. You know, we constantly see these movies about, we're going to colonize Mars, we're going to move to Mars, you know, they're going to build this on Mars. And I'm like, listen, I'm trying to tell people all the time, bro, that's unrealistic. And even if it was realistic, right, I said, what makes you think you're going to look after this new planet any more than the one you've just destroyed? So it's like, you know, there's a massive propaganda sort of like thing going on, which is so subtle that a lot of people don't even know it's going on. You know, they just buy into it. It's automatically for them to kind of think that this is the situation. You know, it's kind of subtly embedded in your subconsciousness that this is the way life is going. So yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. I think speaking of the propaganda, that's been something that, you know, if you're willing to face and sort of, I always use the term, it's the water we swim in, because if you're a fish and you're swimming through water, you don't know you're in water. It's just like, oh, this is how the world is, right? And then someone lets you see it, like I feel like I started to wake up to, oh, this is water. Because I remember even in like some class I was in, we were learning about how, speaking of Hollywood and propaganda, even cartoons that are made still in you know, directed toward kids. Often the villains would have characteristics, even if they weren't Black or dark skinned, they would have characteristics that were like associated with minorities, with Black people, with natives, with basically like bad, right? Like we're talking about how the bad person in the movie is never American. Even so, such insidious things like a character having big lips, whereas I would see it and be like, oh, that's just the villain. And it's like, oh no, I'm starting to associate and I don't even know it. So even someone like me that feels fairly aware, like every day, and I think this is, I'll speak for myself, but especially recently, I think it's becoming, I have felt almost like I live in a hall of mirrors where I'm like, oh, this is my privilege. And then I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh wait, that is privilege too. Oh wait, oh, that is also this insidious propaganda. And it's like this thing that's very uncomfortable. And I kind of appreciate that we're tying in, you know, it's not just the Black experience, not just the Indigenous, not just anyone, the Mexican, right? Ruben, I don't know if I can share your joke. Last week you were like,
Mexican. Hold on, they call the Mexican? Do you need Mexican opinion?
See,
okay, perfect.
I'm gonna say stuff wrong. Did I say it wrong? But that
they
last
don't
week
call the Mexicans. Yeah, I mean we got Speedy Gonzalez. Okay, everybody gets all these superheroes. Mexicans get Speedy Gonzalez, right?
I sound like my grandma now.
I love Speedy Gonzalez.
I know. Well, see,
He's one of my favorite characters.
they want you to believe that.
Yeah, I loved him. He was one of my favorite characters back, that's what
Yeah.
I even knew what a Mexican was.
Well, the fun part, growing up, in the 80s, Mexican 70s, it's a lot, I was talking to my friend Leela here, who was, we talked about the, racism that went on there, because right now you have that going with Trump. You have, you have kids waiting in the border with, like kids like separated from, like we said, you're talking about 30 years ago. In America now, it's America now.
Yeah,
and there's kids separated at the border, being traumatized, being assaulted, and Americans are okay with it. There's not, which is sad, because what happened to religion, people? Like I'm thinking, okay, well, let's bring all this together. I'm like, okay, even if it wasn't, these are kids, these are babies,
Right.
sleeping on, so, but we go back and, we listen to different, this pinnacle moment in this time it's a beautiful time right now. Even what's going on, because we talk about Hollywood, where they're taking off Gone with the Wind, and people are, I'm going to say white people are all like in a furry, because that's a it's a classic. I'm like, you can't see the racism in there. It's I don't know when that was, like 1950s, I'm like, it's so far away. I'm like, you still can't see the racism, or white, it's just all this stuff that is getting, we're erasing history. I'm like, no, we're making history, right? We're not erasing history, because like Leela said, we were never taught any of this stuff. Like we were never taught, you go to South America, Leela, we talked about this last night, you go to Latin America, and now they're all turning left, right? And it's because what you said, because America colonized them, Exxon, everybody went down there, took all the natural resources out, killed the indigenous again, and so did the country, the dictator and all that stuff. So we have all this trauma that we put on not just our country, but a lot of countries, right? And at least Australia has apologized. We haven't even got that yet, right?
No,
so how can So how can you start healing from that point? So, and I appreciate your stories, because it's funny how we say, the common denominator is always social economics too, right? It's always the poorest of the poor who can't defend themselves, and they get the shitty land, right? Like over here in Sacramento, we have there's I think a place called Poverty Ridge, but it's because it's on a high part, right? So basically, like, all the rich people get on the highland. So if there's a flood, all the poor people always get they always get the shitty land, right? American Indians, same thing. Every time they moved American Indians and they found something or something valuable, they pick them off and move them to So we have the same thing here. I mean, the land,
And it's funny you should touch on that, Ruben, because this is where we need to go as a people in a united thinking. Is that we need to understand that really racism is a construct that is actually used as a weapon by the wealthy to keep us at each other's throat. It's actually not something that it's not actually something that really existed before slavery. It only came about because the wealthy at the time, who had Irish indentured servants, and they had Native Americans in captivity, and they had slaves. They realized that those guys at the time got on really well. There was a lot of interbreeding, a lot of mixing, and at some point the wealthy realized that, hold on a second, these guys are getting on a bit too well. They outnumber us like 10 to 1. If they decide to rise up, we're screwed. And they like literally set about dividing everyone, to the point where they would literally say to the light-skinned slave, right? They would literally say to the light-skinned slave, look, you're better than a dark-skinned slave. So what we're going to do, we're going to let you serve us in the house, and you're going to be a house slave, while the dark-skinned slaves who are below you can stay in the fields. And then they'll go to the dark-skinned slaves, and they'll turn around to them and say, oh, you know what? That light-skinned slave thinks they're better than you. Look at them, sort of like walking around like their shit don't stink in the house, kind of thing. So that was one. And the funny thing about that, that's just one aspect. And that is still, if you go to the Caribbean, you can still see the effects of that today. Yeah. And then they took the indentured Irish servants and the white folk, and they said to them, listen, you know what? You're better than the blacks and the Native American Indians. You can we can give you a loan, you can buy a farm, own a house, you can vote and everything else, and therefore you're superior to them. And basically that again is still evident today, because those working class people who probably are subjected to almost the same kind of treatment as a lot of ethnic minority groups are the ones that are literally like safeguarding, the very people that are keeping them underfoot, like through racism, because they feel like, if you come up to modern times, they feel like their story is not being told. So, for example, I know George Floyd dying and black people dying at the hands of police is a really bad thing. But what you find is that in the poor white communities, they're actually recipients of the same kind of treatment. They die as well by because of police brutality. They get picked on a lot because they're poor and everything else. But no one tells their story. So, the reason why their story doesn't get told is because it doesn't fit the narrative. If you start pointing the finger at poor white people, then it suddenly looks like, hold on a second, it's not just black people that are poor and uneducated and suffering. There are poor white people too. So this is not about color. This is about a wealth distribution. And so the media don't report on that as much, because then it starts to look different. Then it's not a black problem anymore. But the problem is, why they also don't report on that, those same white people that are subject to the same treatment as a lot of minorities, they're like angry because they feel like, hold on a second, this shit happens to us too. Why are we not being heard? Why does the black person get or the Hispanic person get all the limelight? So they get mad and they vote for people like Trump because he feeds into that. He's like, you guys have been ignored. They're forgetting about you. You're going to be outnumbered, blah, 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 and he feeds into that psychosis. And that's why you see the kind of reaction you see right now in the terms of Trump rallies and the people that support. If you notice, like, people that support Trump are almost psychotic in their kind of their support. It's almost like you're thinking, you okay, dude? Did you miss your meds today? Or does anybody know you're not literally not in the hospital right now?
Can we just prescribe some?
Do you know what I mean? It's like crazy, because it's almost like they feel suddenly that someone's heard them, you know what I mean? And they're so like elated and taken with that they're just running with it. They're like, oh, finally we got someone to champion our cause. Personally, I think America could not have done without Trump, because I feel that America was asleep at the wheel. Let's be honest. As much as I love Obama, and I think he's a very charismatic kind of guy. I love the way he talks. I love him as a person. I don't think he did enough for America at all. And I feel like he was just the same as Hillary. I feel like that, they were just protecting the corporate giants who are behind the scenes, putting their money into politics as usual. And I feel like you needed someone like Trump to wake Americans up, to make you realize that actually, you know what, you're not far removed from where you were in the 1950s. You're literally in the same spot. It's just that they've managed to sort of like coat it with like it's chocolate. It looks like nice and sweet on the outside, but in the core, it's rotten. So you needed someone like Trump to come along and shake things up. So people, but look at what's happening now. Like, people are actually actively going out, protesting, actually realizing that these people still exist. They haven't gone anywhere. The Ku Klux Klan might be an illegal organization, but people with that mindset are still here. In
the police force and
in the police force, in the government, walking the street. It's still here, and Alise included, my lovely wife, she thought racism, she thought racism has ended. When we first met, she was like, oh, she was shocked when I was talking about racist stuff. She was like, oh, I thought racism was over. And I'm like, there's so many people walking around before Trump came in.
Because I was like, literally, how could you think that? Like, we're able to be educated a little bit more now. How could anybody believe that stuff? Because it's growing. So again, I think it's a lot to do with education. I think what Toks was saying as well is that race is a economic system. And I think that we're all like a liberal person is there like worried and trying to work out on how they can educate themselves and how they can be more loving, which is kind of like saying, how can recycling save the planet? So it's kind of like, it makes you feel guilty. It makes you go, oh shit, what can I do? What can I do? So it's not that you can't do anything and you are not the problem, because we all are. We make the problem. But at the same time, it's a political issue. Like race it's all about power play. Like, if you take back to the history, Christopher Columbus was just this white dude running around pretty much like on a corporate thing going, how can I make the profit better? So he arrives in America, and one of the things that he said in his diary was, all these people are really healthy and they're really friendly and they're going to make great slaves. That was his first journal, and you can read about that.
That's not someone, and that's not even someone reported on what he said. He actually wrote this in his own handwriting. This is what he actually wrote. He actually wrote that the natives are so welcoming and so naive and so innocent that all I need to do is return here with 40 soldiers and I can subjugate them. And that's literally what he did. And, you know, so, and that's where we've been going from that point.
So they were basically sailing around. Same here, we've got Captain Cook. Basically, you know, like these guys were just like, you know, Captain Cook got shot in Hawaii for trying to kidnap a 12-year-old girl. And got shot by her father, thankfully, like, hooray. These people were literally...
Didn't he get speared? I thought he was speared.
Pedos. Like, they're literally, like, running around, like, you know, I know you can't use that word very often, but they were literally running around. The stories that you read about, like, slave owners that were having relationships with their slaves. How can you have a relationship with someone that's your property? Right. And you can just make more baby slaves that you don't actually have to pay for. And then you can run around like, you know, like
Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson's there with 14-year-old slave girl.
Yeah.
If you think about that, like when we say we have no education on history, because we would just literally fall off our chairs. Like, I know we're not supposed to be shocked, but we are shocked because we haven't heard this stuff. And like, even when we think, oh yeah, I know that people are racist. I watched Roots. I've done this. I've done that. We have literally no idea that the foundation of racism, basically, and the foundation of this sort of power play. And it's kind of up to us to actually dig a bit deeper and really see kind of what's going on.
But it's uncomfortable. So, you know, a lot of people can't. I mean, you got to think it, because it's like when people say to me about talking to people about religion, for example. Like, I don't talk to people about religion because it's uncomfortable. It's like you're wearing a woolen jumper and I yank at one thread. You know, it's gonna unravel the whole woolen jumper. It's not so. It seems like I'm just saying one thing about religion, but like in the person's mind who's religious I'm talking to, it's unraveling their whole life because their whole life has been based on this concept. And it's the same thing for white people, because white people have not, their whole life has been based on a lie, basically. I mean, your history is full of lies. It's all from perspective. So like, so when someone is pulling down a statue of Christopher Columbus, people are like outraged because they're like, this guy's a hero. This guy did this. This guy did that. But they don't know the other side because obviously it wasn't taught in school or university even. You know, you have to literally go out and do your own independent studies to actually get to the truth. So these people have an issue dealing with all this kind of like suddenly all this information flooding into their environment that that is in contradiction to what they've been told. And I understand. I'm actually aware of that. I'm actually understanding that, you know, it's difficult. Not people don't want to be consciously racist. It's just that they feel like
they don't want to take down the identity, like do the work to take down their identity of who we think we are.
Yeah, it's like it's really hard work for some people. It's like you have to really consider, you have to start from ground zero. And let's be honest, right? As individuals, trying to unravel what you've learned and then build yourself up from the beginning. Yeah. It's not an easy thing to do, you know. So a lot of people, I know, because it's race at the moment, it's quite easy to turn and point the finger at people and say, you're racist. But I think it's a lot deeper than that. I don't think people are consciously racist. I mean, of course there are people like that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of people that are racist, you know, and you're right about Trump. He's bringing it out. You know, and you know, because when this first happened, I worked at a restaurant and I've never had this happen before where someone complained about a white woman complained about a Mexican woman because she didn't like her accent. Right. Her accent was driving her nuts, you know, and all this other weird stuff that, you know, people feel empowered to say nowadays, you know, and then they, you know, when you call them on it, oh, that's not racist. I'm like, you don't even know what you're saying. You can't even reflect enough to understand that this is racist, right? And a lot of the times, like right now, I had this conversation to say, it's like I think you're completely right about we needed Trump to shake it up, right? it's horrible. I mean, it's
horrible.
you know, it's horrible what's going on, but you're starting to see, you know, that people need to get together and you know, and take it out. And you know, that group of Trump supporters is really small in America. It's not that big, right? You know, everybody else is like, you know, I mean, we're all having to deal with our own stuff, right? Because we had to sit back and, you know, I'm sitting back and actually learning more about Black history that I didn't know because I was never taught it, right? So I started, you know, researching Malcolm X, you know, and I didn't know what happened with him. Now I know, you know, but you know, one thing that got me really going was that he's, you know, in an interview, they're trying to get him to say his name, right? You know, what's your last name? He's like, I'm not going to say my last name. And why are you going to say your last name? He's like, because, you know, it's not my name. It was given to me, right? It was a slave owner's name. So, and I was super interesting that they just wanted him to name his name. And then he said, well, I'm right now, after this, I'm going to go to LA to protest the killing of 7 African-American men that were shot by the police. And the reason why I bring this up is because of some of the, you know, some of the buildings that got burned, and during the Rodney King riots, I had the same reaction. Like, why are people burning their own neighborhood, right? So it took me this much time to realize, like, because, you know, I told someone, and I was having this, you know, heated discussion. I said, look, revolutions start this way, right? If you can't hear someone not, you know, like Colin Kaepernick, peaceful, you know, a peaceful protest, right? They wouldn't listen to him. You know, the president called them son of a bitches, you know, all this stuff. They wouldn't listen. So what? Guess what? You have to yell, right? You have to break something for people. And this is how revolutions start in Latin America. This is how revolutions start. When people finally get tired of this and you're not listening, you're going to have to yell at some point. You're going to have to scream, break things. And then, oh, guess what? Now everybody's attention, right? Now we have all this stuff going on, right? And so, you know, it is up to me amazing the fact that I didn't know that back then in the 60s, this is way back then, that we're still protesting about the same thing about African Americans getting shot, right? And and so to me, it's amazing, you know. But you know, like I said, you know, it's you have to want to see that way back then that happened, and we're still talking about it now. You know, we shouldn't be talking about it now. We should have been past this point.
I also feel like there's this willingness that's needed, just like a tiny bit of willingness. I really like that sweater analogy that you use, because if we picture our unawareness of history, of systemic racism, of world history, and how we've like obliterated entire populations, if we picture that like a sweater that keeps us nice and snugly warm, and one that we thought we were born just like, this is my skin, this is what I look like. And then I think that my kind of reckoning in the last few weeks, and I've been someone that like considers myself woke, and I hate to say that, but it's like I've been on this journey. I've watched all the movies. I took racism classes. And the other day, I remember when I first got sober, I looked around at life just completely differently, because your life completely changes when you stop using drugs. And the other day, Michael, my partner, and I were driving, and I saw a house, and I was like, oh, that's such a cute little house. Like, I can totally picture that being like a house from the 50s. And immediately my brain was like, for a white person, that's a house from the 50s that a white person would live in. And even just thoughts like that I'm like, because my entire worldview, everything between my ears is white. And so I guess I'm bringing this up to say, I see a new reckoning, thank God, for not just like the Trump supporters, because they're so far off the reservation that it's like, whatever. Not like whatever, we need to care, but they're just so far gone. But the people like me who think that we're not, and think that we're very much Black Lives Matter. And I genuinely say that. And I'm not saying that like I think bad things about Black people. It's not like that's been the kind of reckoning that I've had. But to go even deeper and realize that even something like looking at a house and thinking, oh, how cute, it's from the 50s, and which is just like one thought in a bazillion that I have in a day, that even that is a part of my like sweater. And similarly, all of us that aren't indigenous populations, or something else I'm seeing. I don't know if you guys have experienced this. It's fucked up. But I have this guy who, I don't know why we do this, but he's like a far right conservative, and I'm who I am. And we'll just trade articles. Like he'll send me one and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe you actually read this. And then I'll send him one and he's like, we're not changing each other's mind. And the other day, he told me, well, you know, I'm like, I have a Cherokee. He's part Cherokee, which is a Native American here in America.
Hold on a second. What, the far right guy is part Cherokee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, and also too. So this is a weird double thing.
Yeah.
What's messed up about the Native populations here is that in order to claim Native descent, you need to often, and anyone watching or that knows this, correct me where I'm wrong, but there's a certain amount of Native you need to be in order to benefit from healthcare, from like financial relief. Like there's benefits to being Indigenous, right? So it's kind of messed up that you have to prove, like, essentially, and we were just talking about this, that Indigenous populations get bred out of the population. So their whole idea is like, let's just keep procreating until there's so little amount of this percentage that we don't have to pay them anymore. We don't have to take care of them anymore.
Yeah.
So that is true. And people like this guy who is fucking racist, outright, like, far gone. He thinks that George Floyd was a hoax, by the way. So he's like really far off the reservation.
Wow.
But that there are a lot of people like that think, well, you know, like I have some Indigenous in me. So like I cannot be
racist.
And right? Like,
Well,
but
that's
like both those can be true.
but everybody thinks they can't be racist.
White girls that like dating black men and voting for Republicans. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you don't like you know, you can't just say like, oh, I've had sex with a black guy, so I'm not racist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of white girls out there doing that,
Yeah.
and you know.
I mean, yeah, it's one of the reasons why I married Alise, because, like, yeah, I knew she was, you know, receptive to sort of like the information that you need to in order to be in a relationship with a black person. Because I know a lot of white women are attracted to black men, but I don't think they realize how difficult that relationship is going to be. Not between the two of you, because I mean, obviously, relationships always come with their challenges anyway. But then when you put into addition the challenges of not understanding what someone might go through because of the color of their skin, because your mind is not geared that way. It's like all of us reading about an horrendous murder, and you know, and you're like, why the hell would someone do that? You know, kind of thing. And it's because your mind is not geared that way. You can't ever fathom why somebody would do that. So
Yeah.
it's always shocking to you, right? And it's the same thing when you're not racist. You're like, well, of course people are not racist, because why would anybody be racist? It's just no, it makes no sense. But unfortunately, there are people out there. And funny enough, unfortunately, right, Melissa, like, you know, the people that are the most dangerous are people like yourself. And I mean that not in a horrible way. I just mean it because
With the chicken suit.
Because I'm crazy.
No, because we know the far right, like your guy, you know, who's far right, who doesn't like black people. They're out there waving their flags and doing their thing. We see them. We know there's no chance there's very small chance in convincing them to be other, you know, another way. But where the problem sort of like comes about is people that like yourself, who are well-meaning but don't understand how deep the racism thing goes, and you kind of, in your kind of, for lack of a better term, in your ignorance, you kind of support the racism structure, you know, because you're not active enough. Like I have so many white friends who don't want to say things. They're afraid of getting things wrong, or, you know, being attacked. And I'm like, look, for starters, you know, you're going to make mistakes. People are going to attack you. I mean, I get attacked by black and white. It's just what it is. But the difference between you and I is I don't have the privilege of sort of like being able to say, I don't want to be uncomfortable. You know, it's like I can't walk away and say, because then they're still going to follow me through my life. So if I don't have this conversation with you or anyone else, that I may be somewhere in some part of some country and have to deal with this through someone else's ignorance. So whether I deal with it on Facebook or social media, I'm still going to have to deal with my life. Being white, you have that privilege where you don't have to do that. You can just say, well, this is uncomfortable. I don't like being attacked. These black women have come for me, so I'm not going to deal with it. You know, oh, I said something and I said it wrong and everyone came for me. It's like, and, you know, it's just, you know, if you look, nothing worth having is easy. Nothing, no change comes about like easy. It's not, you know, you have to be uncomfortable. You have to be at the receiving end of, like, you know, abuse or vitriol. You know, it's just the way it is. It's not going to be an easy process. You can't think you're going to walk into stuff and be able to just talk to people and they're going to listen. It's not going to happen, you know. So you have to be prepared to be uncomfortable. And I think that's where people like yourself get it wrong, because I always say to my friends, like I have one friend who's very knowledgeable about Indigenous rights in Australia, and she's always very quiet. And I'm like, well, you can't keep telling me that you're afraid of getting it wrong, because if you notice, people who are on the far right, like, they don't know any black people or people of color, but they seem to be well versed, and if you listen to them, they seem to be the #1 authority on what black people are like, but they have no like information about black people, no history, no interaction. But that doesn't stop them from being vocal. So you have to meet them at their level. If you don't, then you can't be surprised when you think that people of color think that all white people are, what do you call it, racist, because it seems like that. Because all we hear is from the far right, and the people who are not racist don't say anything; they're quiet. So, and that old saying that if silence is complicity. So, it's kind of like that. So this is not going to be easy for sure. And when people are striking out, people of color are striking out, at white people, you have to understand, as a non-racist white person, you have to understand they're not striking out at you. It's just like when I used to do security when I was younger at a nightclub. I used to see people who used to get really mad, at me, but I knew they weren't getting mad at me. It's just because I was the face of the establishment. I was just in the way of what they wanted to do, So it's so this is where we have to be, I think, as people. I think we just have to literally just get into this uncomfortable
chicken soup.
Yeah, chicken soups, exactly.
I think that's so true, and that's why I actually really appreciated the last time I heard you talk, because I think you kept reiterating, for one, it's okay to get in trouble, and that's something that has been my focus point. And often I write about and talk about stuff that I need to learn, because my good white lady.
That person Chris just mentioned the book. Honestly, book is brilliant. If anybody ever has a chance to read it. Like, it's so informative. You're gonna have to be quiet. Okay.
I feel like we should include, I'll do this after the live, I'll put some links, because we've also seen people asking about the movie 13th. So I'll put a link to that movie. That was it was like a half hour ago.
Yeah.
But
let me go to Chris's question here, because it's a good question and we kind of passed it over, but Melissa's the reader, so read it out.
Okay. Chris said, why does it feel like colonialism and oppression is color-coded? It seems to me that it's always those peoples that are black or brown skinned being oppressed by white people. And how do we as white people begin to break the matrix of our white privilege? What are the most impactful ways to make a difference?
Oh.
Can I say something for now while you have a think?
Yeah, okay.
Do you know what I think? Like, my analogy, and it not might be perfect, it's like we've woken up, I'm talking about white people, we've woken up and gone, it's like our grandparents were like Nazis and we had no idea. And we were like, they've benefited. We thought that we just came from this really wealthy family. And we just thought we were all really smart. And we just thought we were all worth it. Like we
were told that. Yeah,
right.
So we realized one day that actually all the wealth that we have in this analogy is been stolen. So all of a sudden I am an heiress, but I'm the heiress of a really shitty fortune.
Yeah.
I realized that all these people died for me to have what I want. And they're going, oh God, this is terrible. But at the same time, I'm an heiress. I've been brought up this way. And now you're telling, what am I supposed to do now? I've realized that my grandparents were Nazis, that they stole all this stuff from Jewish people. And am I going to say, oh, I don't know who they were? Am I going to give it back? Like, am I going to give it back and me be poor? Well, and like it's an interesting question. And I think that's what we're so terrified of finding out that we've got the jewels, and we got the jewels by stealing them. Like when you talk about looting, look at the British Museum. The British Museum is full of stolen.
It's not even about the British. It's not even the British Museum. I mean, the crown jewels that the Queen wears on her head. The gold is from Ghana. The jewels, they dug them out of the wall of the Taj Mahal. So everything they literally own is like stolen.
Yeah.
So like it's so strict. It's like someone made an interesting comment the other day on social media, and they said, how can you be mad at people burning down stuff that they built for free? And I was like, well, that's actually a good point. I mean, if you want to burn the shit that you built for free, then surely you're entitled to do that. So
yeah, it's kind of like, like when they talk about India and colonization, India is perceived up until very recently as a third world country because Britain took trillions of dollars and made itself a first world country based on stealing. And then they go, oh, you guys, we're so much better than you people. Will you come over and open some shops? And who's going to like do all of that stuff? Like, you know, who's going to, literally the modern day example of who's going to drive the Deliveroo? Who's going to deliver me my freaking food? Who is going to be the lowest down in the food chain? And I think that as white people, it kind of like the them and us, like it's kind of like, are we going to give up our position? And I think the thing is, we don't really have to do anything right now other than start this conversation. Like, we don't know the answers of how this is going to pan out. That doesn't work.
Well, no, you can do some things. I mean, like, the thing is,
what I mean is, we don't have to go, like, we can't, like, you know what I'm saying is, we don't have to be completely scared of an outcome where we lose, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like, oh, we realize that we've stolen all this stuff. And it's kind of like, for example, as a white Australian in Australia, are we going to give back all of these Sydney $25 million homes and say they belong to Aboriginals?
No, but I mean, look, as far as I know, no one's asking you to do that. I think the way forward is that, you know, it's like to understand that there's been an imbalance, like just to talk in normal, you know, terms. There's been an imbalance, and the imbalance needs to be readdressed. And, you know, from colonialism and slavery, the West and the white race has benefited from that. And what you can probably not do now is stand as people who have benefited from that privilege. You cannot now stand in judgment of people who you've literally taken everything away from. It's like I used an analogy again. It's like, you know, you run a 100-meter sprint, and then, you know, the white people got to start off at 80 meters, 20 meters from the end, and the black people and everyone else got to start off at the, you know, from the beginning. And then as you start to run, you know, people start to put hurdles on the track as well. It's like, you know, come on, you've got to give people a chance to catch up. Everyone keeps talking about it's an even playing field, but it hasn't been, and it still isn't now, because, you know, segregation was only like how many years ago? Like 70 years ago, 60 years ago. That's not that long ago, you know. So it's like
not even,
you know, so and then they should, like, look, it's really, really deep, and like I said, it's always about wealth. And the problem is, you know, people complain about Africa being poor, which is not, by the way. But again, that's a narrative you get sold, because you get to see media images of these starving children with flies in their face and you know, distended stomachs. That's not how all of Africa is. That's a very small portion of Africa. It's not poor. And unfortunately, the countries that are in disarray and are poor because they're mineral rich, and Western governments secretly fund people to keep them in that way. Like, you know, we've had in Africa, we've had elected, you know, democratically elected, basically, you know, we've got a system of government forced on us by the West. We try and adhere to it. We democratically elect officials, and when those officials get elected and they're not happy about the continued rape of the country by the West, those people, one or two things happen to those people. They either get assassinated, or they get depicted in the Western media as despots and dictators. But all they've basically done is stood up and said, we don't want you to keep taking shit from us. We want to stand on our own 2 feet. And my thing is, like, because of the uneven distribution of wealth, like, from a logical point of view, if you think about it, if you stop raping one part of the world and allow them to stand on their feet and build their infrastructures, you wouldn't have mass immigration. So mass immigration would no longer be a problem, and therefore you wouldn't have, like, the burden or the so-called apparent burden on the West to sort of, like, take these people in, because those people won't want. Look, most people, if you speak to them, didn't want to leave their countries. They had to, because they want a better standard of living for themselves and their families. So I feel like it's one of the reasons why I don't give to Oxfam and I don't get involved in all those charities, you know, when they say, you know, they're trying to help Africa. I don't believe it, because I feel those people are just part of the problem. I just think it's another way of making people think they're doing something, and absolving them of like, you know, kind of real change. Basically, you think, I give $10 a month or whatever, $100 a month to this society because I'm trying to make a difference. But it's an easy way out, you know, because those companies or those corporations are not making a difference. And, you know, to make a real difference, you have to hold your governments accountable. You have to change immigration laws. You have to stop them funding, you know, selling weapons. Look, just going off on a tangent here, right? One of the things I always say to people all the time is like, you know, the West in the media their presence when it's shown on TV, they're always preaching, we want world peace, we want to police the world, we want everyone to be, you know, get on. But I'm like, well, if that was true, right? The biggest manufacturers of weapons are the Americans, the Israelis, the Swedish, the British, and the German. Now, if you really want world peace, where are you going to sell those? Who are you going to sell those weapons to? Like, you know, we're talking. This is the capitalist society. These are corporations. They don't want to go out of business. So how in any shape or form is it beneficial for them to have world peace? That makes no sense. So, like,
well, let me give you one example. A real, like right now. So Mexico right now.
I have to turn my camera off for a second. I have to fix my cat's doing something. So I'm still here. I'll be back.
So the biggest exporter of guns to Mexico is the USA, right? The biggest consumer of drugs in Mexico is USA. You know, so I remember, you know, going there and, you know, and I'm from California, but I'm Mexican. My parents are Mexican, and they would, you know, I'm Chicano, so they call me, you know, I'm from here or there. Like I have 1 foot here, 1 foot there. And they'd always ask me like, hey, you know, you guys are always blaming us because, you know, we have all these cartels. So he's like, you understand this capitalism. If you guys stop doing this, I guarantee you there will be no cartels, right? So, and then you go down all the way down, you know, like you said, you know, these people who are Central Americans, right, who are coming to the border with their kids, and, you know, I mean, and you're a mom, you know, and I tell them, like, you know, I try to tell people that, you know, I'm like, imagine what the country is like for you to take your kid, your baby, all the way through another country just to reach, you know, thousands and thousands of miles just to reach a border because you need to feel, you know, you need to feel safe, right? Or you need to, so, you know, and that's the sad part is that people just don't, you know, with the rhetoric here in America, people just don't get, you know, you know, a lot of people, when we talk about this stuff, you know, it's like, you know, I've talked to a lot of people. We talked about, well, you know, African Americans are the lowest, I mean, unemployment, right? But these people that always talking, like Candace Owens, right? I saw her talk with Cornell West, and what I realized that, you know, and I know this because I talked to a lot of business people. Business people have a lack of empathy, right? They're always about numbers, you know, and I'm starting to realize this now. I go, you know, they lack empathy, right? I'm an artist. I have total, you know, empathy with everything, right? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you know, so I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, what I loved about Cornell West is that they were, you know, he was with Laura Ingraham and Candace Owen. He's like, yeah, that's great. I appreciate that, you know, that unemployment number. He's all, but that just means that they're working 2 jobs, right? And he's all, but you don't understand. Like, yeah, you can give. It's like Trump reminds me of Daddy Money, right? Who just gives money to his kids, and, you know, but they need, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of therapy because he never hugged them, right? And that's what I think a lot of these people are. Their money, they just throw money at things and think it's going to work without kind of, you know, any kind of like human interaction, or, you know, like Melissa's a life coach, you know, any kind of guidance. You know, a lot of these people that get out of, you know, when they, you know, the name defunding the police, I think is not a good name, you know, because it scares a lot of white Americans. But the theory, you know, America's never been about preventative medicine. Right. It's always been like, you get sick and, you know, you're going to have an operation and all this stuff. Right. And defunding the police should be more narrative of preventative medicine, because a lot of this stuff is, you know, you do need community interaction. Right. And when they'll say, well, we give you all this money, and, you know, and it's really sad to hear, because they'll always say we're giving them handouts. Like, I grew up on welfare. You know, I grew up, and I know how much that I hated being in the free lunch line. Right. I was a poor Mexican kid, you know, my parents didn't speak any English, you know, and that actually did a lot of damage to me. You know, I was always shy. I wouldn't even eat. at some point. When I hang out with my white friends, I'm like, I'm not going to eat, so, and some of these words that, illegal alien, it dehumanizes people. They don't make them, they don't, so yeah.
How can you be, I mean, how can a human being be an illegal alien? I mean, you're basically demonizing someone based on, imaginary lines you drew on a map, like from lands you actually stole. And then you're going to demonize the people that you stole the land from, because you're basically keeping their countries poor because it benefits you.
Well, yes.
But then when they try to run away from those lands because they're now poor, because they don't want their families to suffer, then you're going to label them like, in a way that it seems like they're just moochers. I mean, it's like I said, at least with the South Americans, you cross land. You're on a solid landmass when you try to, when you try to gain access to the US. I said, like in Africa, people who are running away from African countries, they literally have to put their whole families in these makeshift boats, you know what I mean, and sail across like horrendous seas to get to a land where they can even start making like a trek to a place where they think they can, find a decent, standard of living. So I'm like, people that are always going about immigrants and refugees, I'm like, who do you think is sitting in their living room watching Netflix, gets up one day and decides, you know what, guys, I think we should kind of go to America, but let's not do it the right way. Let's just pay some guy, let's put us in the boat that may or may not make it, may run out of fuel, may sink, is overloaded. I'm going to put you all at risk because I think, it's challenging and I think life is exciting. Let's just go and do that. I'm like, who does that? I mean, think about it. Why would you do that to your family? In fact, I read a comment once where someone said, actually a boat had capsized and a lot of people had been lost, and the person wrote, well, it's their fault for putting them in that position in the first place. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
No, I know that.
You think someone would do that because they had nothing better? There were other options on the table. You think that there are options? It's like, I hear Australians all the time, they're like, oh, we don't mind people coming here as long as they go through the correct channels. So I'm like, okay, so you're basically saying if someone's in a war-torn country where they're getting bombed literally relentlessly all the time, there's almost no building standing, you want that person to take their time to make their way to the Australian embassy, fill out paperwork, and the Australian embassy say to them, well, you got to pay this much money. And let's say for argument, which is a lot of money, right? So let's say for argument's sake, they have the money, right? And they pay that, but then the Australian government or the embassy, whatever, turns around and says to them, okay, thank you for filling out that form. We'll get back to you. And you're like, when? And they're like, yeah, well, we don't know yet. It can take anything between the period of 6 months to a year.
Or 7 years.
Or 7 years. Or you're like, so what is that person who literally is a recipient end of a bombardment supposed to then do? Then go back to their house, which, let's say for argument's sake, is the address they gave the embassy, right?
Yeah.
And they go back to their house, and potentially within a week, that house that could be gone. So, how does that make any sense? Go on, Melissa, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just wanted to read something that I saw a while back, that it's a poem someone wrote, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's completely on this subject about why people leave in these horrific situations, why people might be fleeing homes that aren't just like, hey, let's chill and watch Netflix. So I'm going to read a couple lines. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbor's running faster than you. The boy you went to high school with, who kissed you dizzy, my cat, behind the old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one would leave home unless home chased you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought about doing, and so when you did, you carried the anthem under your breath, waiting until the airport hotel to tear up the passport and swallow each mouthful of paper, making it clear that you would not be going back. You have to understand, no one puts their child in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. Who would choose to spend days and nights in the stomach of a truck unless the miles traveled meant something more than a journey? It goes on and on, so I won't read all of it, but I saw this shared alongside the multiple photos we've seen of dead kids floating in water because their family was fleeing a country, whether it was in Syria or from the Mexican border. And this what I hear you talking about too, Toks, and I know that we're kind of getting towards the end of the show, so I just want to point out something that I have gotten not just from life lately, but from this conversation, and that is that the impossibility of compartmentalization. And yes, Chris, I'll post a link to that in the comments. But it is impossible to, you know, donate to a cause or to pick, you know, maybe one part of your life and say, okay, this is the change I'm making. And I say this knowing, I think the other tough thing for people is feeling overwhelmed. Like I can't do it all. It's kind of like going back to the recycling idea, Alise. I think I see people be like, well, I'm not going to recycle because I can't figure out, like, it's all so confusing. So there's something in between not compartmentalizing and thinking I'm done with this, and also not getting paralyzed with there is so much wrong.
Well, that's kind of what I meant when I said there's nothing that we're supposed to do. I mean, what I meant is we first of all need to be open to a conversation. And what I mean by that is genuinely open for a conversation, not defensive. Like Toks and I, like it's been really interesting in our relationship how I'm naturally very defensive. I don't even know how to actually have a discussion, if I'm honest. Like that's been something that I've had to learn. I just like pretend I'm a nice person, and then till I'm a complete bitch, and then I kind of like, I don't know how to conversation. I'm really angry at the point that I go, hey, you're like this. I don't know how to have a conversation. And I think a lot of us are really defensive. And we need to open ourselves up to the idea of having a conversation where we're not going to look good. And now we have to put our ego aside to see that. And that's why the love and light people also are part of the big racism problem, that, you know, the vibrational, the negative, the black people, like that. It's all so disgusting and so disgraceful. The all lives matter shit. Like, we've got to be open to have a conversation, and we have to be able to see where that goes. And if we were genuinely open-hearted, like if I approach Toks and I'm open-hearted, I'll have a conversation. If I approach Toks thinking he's wrong and that I'm going to blame him, then I'm not going to get a result. I have to come with an open heart where I've got the ability to hear his point of view. And I think that as white people, that is privilege, by saying, basically, we're going to have to hear you because we're not the ones, you know, in trouble, right? You know, like we're not dying on the streets from like people like just deciding that they didn't like, you know, like that we're doing something wrong. I've never had that worry in my life. I have never even got a ticket for fucking speeding. I just go, hi, police officer. I'm so sorry. I'm really in a rush. And they just, I don't know why I put on an American accent.
You show them your boobs.
I like that. Yes, that's a great voice.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, honey. No, I mean, I've literally gone through red lights. I've gone speeding. I've never got a ticket where there's a real life police officer involved because, and like, I don't approach those situations as if I could die. And like quickly, when you have to say to your daughter, you saw our gorgeous, amazing little child, that you have to say to her that you have to, you know, she is like, you know, have to sort of worry about how you'll get treated by the police, go to school knowing that someone's going to have a go at you, and if you have to push low power mode, tell you your skin's the color of poo, like all these kind of discussions that you have to have. So anyway, I'm just saying that to be open for a conversation is not nothing. It's unpacking your privilege to the point where you can openly hearted come to the table saying, you know, I want to know what I can do.
Yeah, I'll back her up on that one. I think that's really important. It's the same thing when people turn around and say, you know, I want to be in a loving relationship, but try to protect themselves from getting hurt. It's not possible. It's impossible. You have to be open to being hurt to be able to actually fall in love. Do you understand what I mean? So it's the same kind of thing with being able to have a conversation about this stuff. You have to be open to sort of like receiving a lot of information that you're not going to like, right? And it's not particularly personal to you. You're not going to like it, but it's the truth. And it's the only way people can try and start moving forward, because the more you know about the stuff that is going on, the more informed you are about what you do, who you vote for. Like, for example, for me, Bernie Sanders should be a given, right? But that's only because I see the world, I see it as I see it. Like, Bernie Sanders is not given to other people because they see it from a certain perspective, and their perspective is tainted by the disinformation that they've been given. So, yeah, information, education is, and it's a mix of things.
But right now in America, it's not about intelligence, right?
Right.
It's not about. I wish it was, because then we'd have a different conversation, right? It's not about. It's not about listening to each other right now. And I'm all about listening to people, and and trying to really, like, I feel myself as my duty as a Mexican is to engage with white people, and just say, because when I grew up, right, and people are like, well, you're not like the other Mexicans. I'm like, what does that mean? Right. And we all, right. That's what I'm saying. Right. And so, Lila and I were talking about this, the subtle things of, like, I remember when I was growing up, it was, Mexicans, lazy Mexicans. I'm like, okay. Now I was like, now as an adult, I'm like, how the fuck did they come up with lazy Mexicans? Because we do everything for America, right? We've, they're out there.
So hard.
Yeah. I'm like, so it's just funny, you listen to stuff, and Lila and I were talking about this last night, the subtle racism of society, just talking in general, and to me, it's up to me to, and I do have conversations, and I'm a person, like, we talk what you said about having a conversation. I've had, Buddhism in my life for the whole time, and I practice compassionate listening, right? Which is listening to the fact that you're trying to heal the other person. Not that you're going to have an argument with that out of me. You want to hear no matter what they say, you can't retort, right? You have to listen and just see where they're coming from, and then find what the seed of that whole thing is, right? Because a lot of it is, I hung out in my neighborhood where there were mostly white kids, right? And we stuck out so bad, but you know what? They loved our food. We love the burritos. They come up, so food is not, but but I'm saying, it's like, I learned myself that, I have to listen to people, even if it's gonna, irritate the shit out of me. And it's, it's been working, because I listened to them. I said, okay, that's great. I don't challenge them, because at some point, challenges, obviously, it's a guy thing when you're trying to fix everything, So you're like, I'm gonna fix this. You're not gonna fix it. Maybe if you listen and you can absorb it, and I'm a pretty good person that I can absorb conversations and not react to them, but that's another story. But I think that, like you said, it's what's needed now is conversation, right? And people, and you have to feel uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable a couple things that I thought in my head. I'm like, that's kind of edgy on racism, right? And I was like, maybe I shouldn't say that anymore, or maybe I shouldn't think that. But you got to bring things out, right? In order to any kind of therapy, you got to bring them out to be able to deal with them. And I think that a lot of people now it's good to be afraid. That's great, because if you're afraid, that means there's something that you need to dig out, right? And so, Oh, go ahead.
A lot of people don't like that feeling of.
Oh,
A
no.
lot of people, they don't want to be afraid. That's the thing, and it's funny that so many people are actually in society today and all around the world are acting completely out of fear of the unknown, fear of information that they've not been privy to, fear that they've been living a lie. All these different things. So fear is one of the craziest and biggest factors when it comes to people not changing their mindset. It's like when you look at the Jews and the Nazis, a lot of people were, collaborating with the Nazis because they were scared, not because they were Nazis, but because they were scared for themselves, and that's, again, when we divide people into groups, one of the biggest problems that we have to deal with is people's fear that, they're the ones who actually support people to do evil things, because no one is going back to, it's weakness. It's people not being able to stand up and say, hang on a second, that's not right. People don't want to do that. And part of that is that it's part of our primitive kind of like chemical makeup. Like we always want to kind of be in a group. We don't want to stand out. That's how we survive, And so it's difficult to go against that, because unfortunately, because we live in a modern environment, a lot of things we do are going against our natural instincts, and we have to fight our natural instincts to sort of like be able to live in a modern society. Like, for example, getting on the plane, or one of the reasons why people feel like they need to jump off a high building when they go and look at over the balcony is because we were not designed to be in a building that high. So your mind is telling you you're not supposed to be up here, you're supposed to be down there. And that's why you feel the urge that you want to jump off. And we have all those things going in our mind, in addition to dealing with modern society. So it's complicated. And the thing
it is.
Yeah, like,
I know, right? And that doesn't suit the modern day narrative where it's kind of like the 7 habits of highly successful people. And then every email is 5 habits that will change your life. I'm like when are we actually ever going to own up to the complexity? You know, like, and teach even our children about complexity and teach ourselves, and that not everything's this black and white situation actually, and the complexity of everybody's viewpoint and listening to one another, and sometimes being deeply heard, that you were speaking about, Ruben, is like the biggest gift you can give anyone. Like a lot of these people, like, you know, if we talk to Toks, he's not mad with any white people. He just wants us, he just wants to be understood and not have to be sort of stared. He doesn't want a lot. It's like, if you actually, you know,
no, I don't want a lot at all.
He's just grateful for people standing up against racism. He's not expecting us to freaking, I don't know,
look,
start flying.
Yeah,
it's just, you know, he's just expecting us to maybe listen.
Yeah, listen, I just, at the end of it, right, I just want people to just leave me alone, if I'm really honest. I just, you know, I don't want to be judged for the way I look. I don't want people to see me as a color. I mean, unless you're kind of curious about my culture and you want to know about that. You want to, you know, if I walk into a job interview, I want to be judged on the fact that I fit the role, you know, not that, when I was
making up the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be a token black person. I want to be qualified for the job, and I get the job just purely based on my qualifications. You know, that's all. That's what I've been trying to tell white people all the time. It's like, we want to be able to walk into shops and not be profiled. We want to be able to walk down the street and not ask why we're in this neighborhood. You know, we just want to be able to do what you guys do that you take for granted. That's it. We're not asking for anything else, you know?
And they think that you're asking for a lot, right? You're like, we're asking for just, I mean, I'm better with people just being honest and then go, you know, like, okay, well, this is what you think, right? This is what you think of me. This is what you think of, you know. I don't think people have enough reflection in America. I think maybe now because of COVID, you know, we talked about the positives, but people have more time now to think about themselves or what's going on right now, you know, because no one's at work, you know, everybody's at home. This is why the protests are going for so long, because there's more introspective, reflection, right, of going on. Like, hey, maybe I am a little bit of racist, right? Maybe you know, and it is, you know, I'm not gonna say it's okay, but it's okay in the fact that this is how we were programmed, right? We don't know any of our history. Americans, this is what I feel bad about white Americans, and I feel bad because I say that because when I go back to Mexico, I feel my blood. I feel my DNA. I feel my blood, you know, it just, you know, it's like, this is where, you know, this is where I was born. This is where my people, right? Even though California is Mexico too. But when I go back, you know, and I think that a lot of Americans are lost, right? They don't, I go, and I tell them, like, look, get your DNA done and go to where you're from. Like, go to Germany, go to Ireland, and you will feel your, you know, and I think that's a lot of things that we have no roots to where we're from.
Ruben, you are 110% right, because literally growing up in the UK, I experienced that up until the age of 11. And then when my parents took me back to our country, like, you know, of their birth, I mean, my whole life did a complete 360. Like, before I went, I was bad at school. I was always in trouble, you know, and everything else. And then I went home to Africa, seeing people that looked like me, doing things and going places and stuff. It completely changed how I saw who I was. And that's one of the reasons why, and I'm glad I grew up in the UK, because one of the things that it allowed me to do was to sort of like stand astride two different types of civilizations and kind of thing. So you can see things from two different perspectives. And I'm glad for that. But without going home, I probably would have grown up with a chip on my shoulder, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and from a white Australian point of view,
how do you view the
I have never been told, I've never been told by an Indigenous Australian to go home, but yet white Australians tell refugees to go home all the time.
Yeah.
How ironic is that? there is no such thing as a white Australian. Within 200 years, a bunch of us showed up on some convict ships, and now we are telling other people to go home.
I know.
Oh my God. Like, just sit with the irony of that. Every single Australian is an immigrant. Yeah. Every single white American is an immigrant.
Yeah.
And yet we sit and have the audacity to tell other people to go home. Wow. You know,
and you know who I blame is Melissa.
I will take this. I will own this.
She is, I don't want to say, we call them wedos in Mexican language speak.
I am strong enough to take this. And you know what? It's interesting because as we have this conversation, the word ego keeps coming up, which is like a way to just for me to say, like, taking things personally, my forward facing self, like what people think of me. And I think that the willingness to let that be deconstructed, and I'm not saying like, yeah, it's all my fault. Hey guys, I'm the bad white person on the show. But seriously, I'll just say like about a half hour ago, Toks, when you were like kind of addressing me and you were like, the problem is people like you. And I immediately, my body was just like, wait, no, I have to convince him right now. Like, wait, no, make sure he knows I'm like, no, I'm a good white person. And I share that because I know that that is common. And speaking of the Hall of Mirrors, it's like, that's myself. And not to get all love and light and woo, but like, that's my ego. And if I am allowed to just be like, yeah, I am totally part of the problem. And not convince you guys, whether it's people like watching or person I'm talking to, even if I know like what I'm doing. And it's like that's a really uncomfortable place. And you guys, I have to say, speaking of uncomfortable, I'm going to make everyone really uncomfortable right now and say, I have something called mastitis in my boob because I'm breastfeeding and it's hurting really bad. I have to pump every 2 hours right now. And I bring that up. I was thinking about it before the show because I was like, oh, don't talk about that, even though it's like a big part of my day, because it'll make people feel weird. And then it's like, oh, no, that's just the patriarchy, that like I'm not allowed as a breastfeeding mom to be open about that. This is a huge part of my life and it's really painful and it affects everything. And I couldn't work today.
It's natural. It's natural.
Have you had any cranberry juice?
Oh yeah, I already went to the doctor. I've been doing so much crazy stuff.
There's so much, cranberry is great for mastitis, but we feel you. Do you need to go and
express?
I do. Well, I was gonna say, I mean, I could always go and come back if you guys want to keep talking, and or we could agree.
Gonna die.
What'd you say?
I think so. It went into low power mode, but I can't, because we're on this screen. I can't really see what the battery situation is. But I mean, I'm okay to continue talking, but like I know people have got things to do, and I don't want to keep boring everyone. It's kind,
oh my God.
Kind of a heavy.
No, you're getting a lot of really great like thank yous in the comments, and I know that I'm so grateful for this. If anything, my thought is, can we possibly have you guys back? Because I feel like there's so much more to talk about, and it's almost 11 p.m. for us, so I feel like people are probably going to start losing people soon.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Sure.
We're more than welcome to come back because
I think it'd be great.
Yeah, this subject is vast, and I don't think you can really talk about what's happening now without talking about the past and kind of leading up to the. Do you know what I mean? I think it's important that we kind of address it. And
because America's always been like the garden, right? They're always picking the weeds, but they never pick the roots, right? So right now, that's what we're doing. We're taking out some of the stuff that like these symbols, like the Aunt Jemima woman, Aunt Jemima. Yeah, there's all these stuff that, and it's so bizarre because who's fighting against it is white people. And they're like,
so funny.
Yeah, they're like, well, made me feel comfortable because, she's always so soothing. I'm like, okay, and we went through this series of like things. I'm like, okay, and Mexican portrayed in Hollywood movies. I was like, it's so racist. I mean, it's so bad, right? Black people, portrayed same thing. So bad, so, I mean, it's just so bad that I don't even understand how you cannot see that. Right. I guess it's, but,
it's conditioning. It's
conditioning. And
movement. Like,
you're right. And all this.
I grew up on cowboys. I grew up on cowboys and Indians myself. And I always wanted to be a cowboy. So, and I'm a black person. You think I would know better.
But,
I was conditioned to think that the cowboy was the good person. It was only years later that I realized that, hang on a second, that's not right,
Yeah.
But,
if you look at the Republican convention, right, It's all white people, white people, white people. One black person, put the camera on him, right? One Mexican, put the camera on. I'm like, okay, you guys paid this guy to come here to do it, and then why are they wiping around the president, right? It's like, like be who you are, like, what I mean, like be truthful. This is, truthful. I don't care. Like, when I look at a Trump supporter, I mean, I used to be, very, we changed, Mexican blood is very revolutionary. Right? We'll stand, we'll get up and fight, the government, I mean, like, I'm saying, like back then. So, but I'm all about the truth. If you're like this, please just say it. Don't hide behind, the flag, or don't hide behind, don't hide behind this, Blue Lives Matter. I'm like, okay, that just means you don't want to have a discussion, right? And like this, just don't hide behind it. And I will respect you a lot more if you do that, right? And we know where we stand. We can still get along. I mean, I don't banish people out of my life because they don't believe what I believe, because I believe there's an inherent beauty in everybody, right? I believe that there's, that's the only way we're going to get to people. That's why a virus is a virus, right? If a virus was coming from the outside, it would never hurt anybody, right? So if you got to change from within, and you have to have those conversations with people in high places, right? And and they are uncomfortable. I talk to Melissa all the time. I'm like, what does a white chicken do?
Hello.
I'm kidding.
So
no,
okay,
but, sorry.
If I could, I want to tie some things together, at least the way they're working together in my brain. And also, before I do that, if people wanted to get in touch, we didn't even talk about like your creative endeavors. You guys do so much cool stuff in the world that if there's anything that you so Undivided, can we hear about that for a second, Tok?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I'll quickly say, because I think it was, our battery's down to 10% and it's fast dropping. But like, I know it was fully charged when we came on, but it's literally just gone through the battery. But anyway, so I'll quickly talk about it. So Undivided is basically an activist fashion brand. And what it is that it's a couple of things. Like, I basically tried to design a symbol that people could unite behind. And when they see other people wearing it, or it's on show, people realize that the person is of a similar mindset. So, I find that, like one of the subjects we touched on, people don't want to talk about stuff because they feel uncomfortable, they don't want to get picked on, and they start to feel that they're on an island, that it's just them. But I wanted Undivided to kind of represent those people. So those people, when they saw somebody wearing a baseball cap or a t-shirt or jacket, and they had an Undivided symbol, that they realized, actually, I'm not alone. There are other people wearing this stuff, and so they must believe what I believe. And Undivided also wants to change the way people perceive other people. So we're trying to use part of our profits to put on events. You make, short animation movies, just talk about the stuff we were talking about, like little snippets of history, what people don't know, like the Tuskegee experiment, Stonewall, how the Mexicans lost California, things that are really important that people don't know and don't understand. And we're trying to use a part of our profits when we make some profit to do that kind of stuff. So
we even one of the things we want to do in Australia, there's not enough media, there's not enough seeing black people. It's very much tokenism. So they have to get so many black people on to do an audition, but you might appear painting the windows in the back of the scene.
The Republicans
also want to make sure that people know how to do black makeup, black hair, and so that to make a difference in the media, because I know so many people, like Toke said, when he saw a black person on TV in the UK, they used to run out on the street to celebrate with their neighbors. Like, if you don't see yourself, how can you feel okay in that world?
But also, how can you be a productive part of society if you're not represented? Really, you can't, because people want you to grow and want you to be a productive member of society. And how can you be, if you're not represented, then you can't see people who look like you do being productive members of society? How are you then supposed to aspire to that? So it's just common sense, really. But so Undivided is literally about that. It's just literally bringing people together, regardless of your religion, what your sexual preferences are, what your skin color is. As far as I'm concerned, as an individual, it doesn't matter. I actually believe people are allowed to think what they want to think, as long as they're not harming anyone else. That's my honest opinion. So that's what Undivided is literally about. So sorry if I spoke really fast, but I just, I'm conscious of the time.
Your battery.
You know what? Yeah, and we'd like to thank you for coming out. And and I think that we should.
So much.
Yeah, we should have part 2, because there's a lot. which is funny because, we talked usually I play a couple of songs, but the conversation was so, it was great.
It was
meaty. Songs? Ruben, I feel wrong.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. You got to come back for that. So
that would totally kill the battery.
And then Melissa does the dance, and you know what I mean. But it was a great conversation. Yeah, I think people love the conversation. Yeah,
we've been getting people saying you guys have to come back. So we would love to have you, and we would also love to give people a link to how they can find you. And the one that I got earlier didn't work, so we're gonna have to. I'll put it in the comments, and in the comments, I have a couple resources I'm going to share, which actually lives are tough because it's hard to access the comments afterwards. So I'll figure out how to do this. But
sometimes the link doesn't work. But if you go on to Undivided on like Facebook or undividedinc.com or Undivided on Facebook or Instagram and go from there, it seems to work better.
Yeah.
We need to.
It's a Facebook thing. I don't know what to do about it because it works on mine, but like it doesn't work on everybody. So I don't know why that is. So it's a Facebook issue. But
yeah, it'd be good if it did work.
Yeah.
We'll try and get it to work.
Oh, there it is. I found it. I'm gonna just copy this into the comments. So I'm gonna put myself on silent.
Yeah, so we'll be, it's also on Facebook. So if you ever want to link and play it back to anybody or show it to anybody, it's on YouTube too. So this whole, it's on, so it's on Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to go back and listen to it, and people don't have Facebook, they can just go to the YouTube link. So, so we appreciate.
Could you put that in the comments too? So we have a link for the YouTube. Could you put that there?
Yeah, and I'll get that. I'll do that later on.
Yes.
Thanks for coming. Thank you so much for all the resources and info and insight and levity. And so that's the Facebook page. Anyone watching that wants to go follow Undivided, and we will put more resources. We talked about so much in the show. I want to make sure that people have ways to follow up with this, but at least to be able to follow up with you. But thank you so much, you guys.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having us. Thank you. It was really nice talking to you, and I'd love to do it again. So whenever you're ready. Yeah,
I think that's great. Come back. I have a story about Cuba and light-skinned Cubans versus dark-skinned Cubans.
Oh yeah.
And my kind of downfall from what I thought was the revolution. I was like Che Guevara. I'm like I would say Castro because then Bernie Sanders got in trouble for that. But I was like very enthralled, and then I went to Cuba, and they're like, well, the revolution skipped over racism. I'm like, what?
Right.
So we'll tell that story later on. Next time we go. Yeah. Because I think, in every society, it's dark skins versus the light skins. Light skins are always the oppressors, right? In what do you call it? South America. And, so anyways, that's next time to come. So, but we'd like to thank everybody for coming out. Thank you for enjoy. I feel like I should have pet.
It's a pet show now.
So, it's always a pet show. It's a crazy pet show afterwards.
Oh my gosh, Australia and California. It's like they're talking to each other.
That's right, and pets. So we'd like to thank everyone for going out. We're gonna go out with the song.
Wendy's. Where y'all from?
Good night, everybody. Thank you for coming out to the Cali Cocktail Social Hour from Australia. We love you guys. Virtual hug to everybody. Have a great night.
Live free,
she's a dancer.
Speak your piece. Stay humble, stay humble.
Remember, drink your cranberry juice, everybody. I drink my mezcal. You drink your cranberry. Have a good night.
You too, guys. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Murals on the walls for the ones
that we lost.
Bodegas on the corner, let me see what's in store. Subway stations with the maps and the cars. Summer cookouts, uncle got the sandals on. Statue of Liberty, we holding up the torch. If they ask where I'm from, tell them this is New York. We from the home of the biggie, people blowing they ciggies. And these girls going wild cause they flashing they this litty. Watch your steps cause these blocks be. We grew up on that bad boy in 96 with Diddy. Take a walk, come with me. Let me show you what really go down. Fiends on the corner, every hood got a deli or crowns. Cops pull us over, it don't matter if you black or you brown. City never sleeps, this the place that where hip-hop was found. Playground parks with the trees and the cars. Brownstone buildings with the kids on the porch. Murals on the walls for the ones that we lost. Bodegas on the corner, let me see what's in store. Subway stations with the maps and the cars. Summer cookouts, uncle got the sandals on. Statue of Liberty, we holding up the torch. If they ask where I'm from, tell them this is New York. I look around as I'm viewing the city. Skyscrapers and bridges, bright lights, fast life, Manhattan living. Cross over downtown, welcome to the calm.